This Choircast podcast episode is brought to you by Wild Olive, where we host game-changing conversation about literature, culture, and the Bible. I'm Jennifer Bird, a biblical scholar.
And I'm Jean Patrol, a literature scholar. If you want to change your Bible reading game, you can try reading the Bible as literature.
The way writers such as Emily Dickinson, Octavia Butler, Ursula Le Guin, James Baldwin, or Tony Kushner do.
Every other week, we let modern writers give a fresh take on a familiar Bible story.
Tune in to Wild Olive wherever you get your podcasts.
The majority of our life is lived in liminal space.
And there's this in-between space, this liminal space.
This liminality that reveals possibility.
I think we're in a liminal moment, but also in a place of transformation. We could actually change as a people.
I have great affection for the church and a troubled relationship with it.
That can't be the gospel because God said to love our neighbors.
Just to be alive in time means that we're on the threshold of the future.
Just to begin questioning is so difficult, because you have these voices in your ears telling you that you're not a real Christian.
We don't know what the future looks like. We have to work it out together.
Welcome to the Liminal Living podcast, where we have conversations with those who are going through dark nights or deconstruction. Aaron Niequist, welcome to the Liminal Living podcast. It's great to finally meet you face to face. I've been reading your stuff for like years now.
Great to be with you, man. Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Well, you've been doing some really cool stuff in like the liturgical spaces and music spaces and all that. And before we like jump into like the cool stuff you're doing, I just want to know, like, if you could put a soundtrack to this chapter of your life in one song that is not overtly spiritual, what song is that going to be and why are you going to choose it?
What a great question.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean...
I'll let you choose multiples. How about that?
Because it's like, for this particular season.
Yeah, the one you find yourself in now. What's your soundtrack?
Well, usually it's going to be Beatles related. I think the second side to Abbey Road is the greatest piece of music ever captured. But I don't know if this is a Beatles season for me. I usually say my favorite music is always beautiful music created by sad people.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't, happy people making beautiful music, doesn't usually move me. And sometimes if it's too sad, it takes me down with it, melancholy, Enneagram 4. So it would be something. I mean, I'm so troubled by the world right now, and so troubled by my faith tradition's participation in it.
Oh yeah.
So I'm feeling disillusioned. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling a little bit afraid. But I don't want to give up. I'm not going to close my eyes and put my head in the sand and run away. So I need hope. So what is the sad, angry person making beautiful
I'm loving
music
seeing
right now?
Like the gears turn. You're like talking through
the
emotions behind it. And
right.
This is good stuff.
Oh, man. Well, how about this? By the end of this conversation, I will have a song that captures it.
Ooh, okay.
Because I mean, my head's spinning now. I'm not even sure if I can talk.
Yeah.
What a evocative question. I love it so much.
Well, I will throw my soundtrack out there right now.
Yes, please.
My wife and I recently ran into a new acoustic folk artist by the name of Jesse Wells. And he... Gosh, if reincarnation exists, he is the reincarnation of Woody Guthrie.
Really? Okay.
Oh my gosh, his songs, he doesn't stop writing. And then he just posts them like on Facebook. He's just standing in a field with his guitar. There's like no professional recording equipment or anything like that. He's just him and his guitar, and he's playing all these resistance songs that are so artistically... Oh, they captured my heart. Jesse Wells,
Jesse Wells.
Boy. Oh yeah,
okay.
He's our new favorite right now.
Oh,
He's
I love it. Okay,
great storyteller. And he's a great guitar player too. I'm a guitar player, so my band actually covers a lot of Beatles songs.
Really?
So, yes.
What's the best cover? that you guys do?
My favorite one is we actually made a mashup of Weezer, Say It Ain't So, and Yesterday.
Really?
So we start with Yesterday.
Okay.
And then when you get to the bridge, it transitions into totally goes into
great.
The verse of Weezer, and then we slam into that big chorus, and then we end with I Believe in Yesterday. So we bring it back down.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, our lead singer wrote that before we even like started as a band. He wrote that, and I was like, we're gonna have to do that for some people somewhere because that's fun.
Yep, I love it.
Yeah, so I got some Resistance songs and some Beatles songs that are my soundtrack.
Okay, nice, fun. Good.
Well, I've been following you for a while. You were actually on my list when I sat down to launch the podcast. I was like, all right, probably by year 3, I'll be in a place where, folks like that will say yes. I'll come on. And so I've been kind of thinking about this for a while, and I'm wondering, like, what is the soil that your life grew up out of, and how did faith play a role in that?
Yeah. Another great question. Although that soundtrack question is going to haunt me. So, the soil has to be, it's very Christian. I grew up in a very Christian, the two things we loved were God and the Chicago Cubs. That was the thing, growing up in Chicago. And so I think some of that soil was truly problematic stuff I'm trying to really kind of wash off, recover from. And some of that soil is a part of me in a way that is really good and in ways that is just neutral. It's just part of me. I think it's why I believe so much in the idea of include and transcend. Rather than just, well, I don't believe that anymore, I'm going to go do the opposite. Well, maybe. But so the soil that I grew up in was very religious, very Jesus and Bible centric. I mentioned feeling a little disillusioned. Many of the things that they taught me to be, they have now rejected to pursue power. And it's really hard. I have a friend who said, they taught me all these things, and then when I try to do them, they call me woke. So I'm having a both grateful and a little bit weary about the soil in which I grew up.
Yeah. There's a lot of mixture going on too. Like I'm trying to make sense religiously because I have the same thing. Grew up very fundamentalist, charismatic. With,
interesting. Yeah.
Watching like Jack Van Impe preach the end of the world every single day.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff. Very conspiracy theory, like theology orientations. But at the same time, like morality was a big thing. Like you don't say these words, and you don't go to these movies, and you don't do these actions, and it was a very big thing. So I'm trying to make sense of the moment we're in, like from a religious standpoint.
Yeah.
But then also you have like this tectonic shifting of the culture, and I'm trying to make sense, like economically, how do we get here, and politically, how do we get here? And then you start trying to think of all these things at once, and it turns into like this big, huge, cocktail. And you're just like, I no longer can like separate things out. So I've been trying really hard. Yeah. To I'm not one for compartmentalization, being a spiritual formation guy,
Sure. Right.
I got to integrate it all.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, but for this one, I got to separate it out and make sense of each piece before I can put it back together. And it's really hard. I haven't done a good job of it yet. So.
It's so funny. Doug Padgett? Doug has been a friend for many years, and he was the first person I ever heard talking about deconstruction way back in like the emergent days.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, the definition of deconstruction is it's to take things apart in order to understand how the pieces all work. And so that's literally what you just said, kind of deconstructing this moment we're in. I thought that was really helpful.
That is really helpful. because it's hard to see the machine as a whole. You're like,
right.
How did we get here? Like
right.
2016 happened, and I'm like, what just happened?
That's exactly right. Yep.
How did we get here? How did
Yep.
the church just totally
Yep.
like mentors and friends and family? And I'm like, how did all of that stuff that I thought was the roots and the point of what we're doing is like, it's like, let's just put that on hold in order to pursue power, and then we'll pick it back up later. And it's like,
isn't that? Yeah.
That's something that I'm trying really hard to not just fight against, but actually understand, because these are people that I love.
Yeah, me too.
It's hard. Yeah, I don't understand it.
Yep.
So that soil of identity is like, I like that, washing some of that off. No one's ever said that. Like, there's some of the soil of my identity I'm trying to wash off.
Yeah.
Soil can leave like stains and can be dirty. I like that.
Yep.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So what kind of faith roots were there? You say it was very religious and very Christian. Are we talking like an evangelical stream, a like pop church stream?
No, I grew up in a tradition called Plymouth Brethren.
Oh yeah,
are you familiar?
With very familiar.
PBs? Yeah. And so again, I could talk for an hour about the things I really appreciate about that tradition, and still trying to integrate. And then some things just profoundly unhelpful things that containers I needed to let go of in order to stay a Christian. And so, and then I got involved with kind of the evangelical megachurch movement, and that was less theology and more, they had enormous stages and amazing sound systems and great bands, and they invited me to join the music. So it just was a music thing. And then I would say the same thing. I think that's been the hardest thing to include and transcend, frankly. I think I got so exhausted by the show of it all. I wanted to just like burn it all down. It's all... Yeah. Well, that's not true. It's also really beautiful in part. And there are some things that I'm holding on to, even from like, seeker service evangelicalism. There's some things that are really beautiful about that. Yeah. And there are some reasons that I needed to move into some other spaces too. So yeah.
I mean, it is a form of art to do those things. I kind of have found myself in those spaces time to time. I'm now in a very small liturgical church that I've modernized the liturgy to be a little bit more user-friendly, but but I've been in those like seeker movements, and I used to like turn my nose up at it and be like, oh, this is like what really is going to matter. And then I had a realization. I want to show you something. I had a realization. We go to church to be manipulated emotionally, and I'm like, well, it's all whatever. But then I will like pay money to go see a show.
I know.
To be emotionally manipulated and enjoy the whole thing.
I know.
So it's like, I don't know where the line is with that. We love movies and we love theater and we love, music and performance and all this stuff. Yeah. And then there's a line between overproduction and authenticity, and I don't know where it is.
Yeah. And I wonder, for me, it's about function. If you went to see Hamilton every Sunday morning, first of all, the thrill would wear off eventually. But the question is, how is that forming you over time?
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
So that's, we used to always say, like, every church has a liturgy. The question is, how does that liturgy form the community over time? And
that's such a better paradigm to look at it through.
I hope so. And that's why even I can appreciate a seeker service as an initial on-ramp into a conversation. So like a seeker, even that kind of the old seeker service model from the 80s and 90s is a wonderful first step, but a terrible place to stay. So, can we honor what it does? Let me tell an example from the other side. So 6 years ago, I moved from the Midwest to New York City to come to General Theological Seminary, which is it was the oldest Episcopal seminary in the States.
Wow.
And I'm not Episcopalian, but I really appreciate the tradition, and I wanted to learn, and I wanted to be forced to read books I never would have chosen. So the whole thing. Okay. So I start coming to chapel, this very Catholic Episcopal, very high church, smells and bells, the whole deal. Okay. Well, I'm like a liturgy guy. So I'm like there to like soak it up and learn. And I found it impossible to participate because the people there were kind of like, well, try to keep up, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and there was maybe a month or two in, I had the moment, and I said it like in my brain in a funny way, like make myself laugh. I said, I wish they were more seeker sensitive. Like, I moved across the country to learn from you, and you won't help me participate.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of those moments where I was really in the rejecting all of evangelicalism, where I said, you know what? Evangelical hospitality is a gorgeous thing. It's a beautiful thing. Our Episcopalian friends should learn from evangelicals in how to participate and join something in a hospitable way. Nice. And so, anyways, just one example of trying to hold on to the good parts.
Well, when I got at this church, kind of a liturgical church, that was 2019. So I've completed my 6th year here in February.
Oh, nice.
And, my mind was, we don't need to contemporize this church. There's enough contemporary churches.
Yeah.
But the liturgy is inaccessible to new people. And so I need to modernize the liturgy. So I just waited around for a year, got to know the people and everything. But the opening ceremony for the thing was always kids in like their garb with the candelabras coming down. They light 2 candles and then they all go back. At the end of the service, they'll come, they'll take the flame, extinguish, and walk out, take the flame out.
Yep.
And I remember sitting down, I'm like, why do we light 2 candles? And so I'm asking everybody, why do we light 2 candles? And they're all saying, like, what gives the kids something to do? And I was like, okay, but I'm sure there's a deeper reason. Like it makes more sense, in a Christian church that's probably Trinitarian to do 3 candles for the presence of the Trinity. Why is there 2? And that bugging me. And our administrator, she went digging into the archives and found the theological reason was the double nature of Christ, humanity and divinity.
Huh.
Everybody forgot about it. Nobody knew why we did it. It's just for new people coming in, they're like, well, this is weird. And then the new people there, and it's like, well, this is comforting. But nobody knew why, the meaning. And so we had to rewrite the liturgies so that everyone knew why we're doing what we're doing. And then now it's accessible for kind of everybody. And that was how we got around that kind of, we have to be a little more hospitable. I like that terminology.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine inviting a bunch of friends over to our apartment and they arrive and I just say like, go find a drink. No, of course not. I'd say, hey, are you thirsty? Can I take your coat? Just basic hospitality. And I think that's a good thing about my past tradition.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is with evangelical church, they welcome you in and then they say, now you have to believe exactly these 3 things exactly our way. Well, that's a little less hospitable.
Yeah.
So, we've got work to do fleshing that through the whole system, but the impulse is beautiful.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, was there ever a time, I'm sure there is, but could you walk us through a time that's definitive for you that like the idea of faith in your head didn't match your lived experience of it, and then what your response was and how you managed that?
Yeah, I've had maybe 2 or 3 pretty big deconstruction moments. And the first one I actually wrote about in my book, The Eternal Current. And it was I had graduated from Christian college. I had got a job at a church leading worship. And about 6 months in, I just felt my faith, I don't know if it drained out. It was ending. I knew it was ending. I wasn't angry. I wasn't railing about particular theological issues. I just couldn't imagine why this mattered anymore. It was powerful, very powerful. And so, but every 7 days I have to lead songs, help people sing songs that I didn't believe anymore. It was really intense. And I think what was beautiful is I had a handful of people around me who didn't just kick me to the curb. Oh, he's a heretic now. Oh, he lost his faith. Let's get rid of him. But like really walked with me, asked good questions, spent time with me. And then one friend eventually, after a lot of conversation, said, have you ever read The Divine Conspiracy by Dallas Willard? And I hadn't. And so I started it, and it's dry. It's like a textbook. But he got to the chapter about the Gospels of sin management and unpacked basically the thing that I thought was Christianity, which is you're a sinner, believe these things, God will forgive you so you can go to heaven. I literally thought that was Christianity, and then there were optional add-ons around the edges. He unpacked and said, no, the invitation of Jesus is to join Jesus in what God is doing to redeem and restore all things. It was the first time I had ever heard about the kingdom, which is crazy because I had grown up in church and Jesus' primary message was the kingdom. So somehow my going to church twice a week for my entire upbringing inoculated me from Jesus' primary message. It's still unbelievable. I still can't even quite wrap my head around it. But once I heard it, it was the best news I could imagine, truly. And I remember I was sitting on the floor of this tiny little cottage in Michigan reading this, and I started to cry, which for like a Scandinavian 26-year-old was very rare. But I just remember starting to cry thinking, if this is the invitation, I'm in. Very profound experience. Yeah.
Nice. I grew up similar, not even knowing what the kingdom. I'd read it because I was a Bible nerd. Like I taught myself Greek and everything because I was a nerd. And I get to the portions of the kingdom of God, and I was like, I don't know what this is. Yeah. And, I'd ask my pastor who's got all these degrees and whatnot. And he pretty much just said, that's the place we go when we die. It's like, wow. Okay. So it's just synonymous for the afterlife.
Yep.
Nothing about resurrection, nothing about new heavens and new earth. It's just all like, we got to get out of here, kind of a escapism.
That's exactly right. And, the guy, Darby, who started dispensational, like he was the dispensational guy. He started the Plymouth Brethren. So
I didn't know that connection existed.
So that's deep in our roots. So the way that we would say it is the kingdom is for then. So all these teachings, all of Jesus' teachings were for a different dispensation when we're in heaven. I mean, it's
isn't that convenient?
Yeah, isn't that convenient? Oh my gosh.
I think we were I think evangelicalism is really good at crafting culture. We're like social engineers, to the point where we can manufacture emotions that we want people to have in the moment.
Yeah.
Down to a T, lighting, fog, music, responses, all that kind of stuff, which has its place to a point.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily about understanding how do we live the way of Jesus.
Yeah.
It's more of crafting the culture around this pop religious evangelicalism.
Yeah.
I just got an anonymous letter from some guy. It's right here. I got it in the mail today. And he's like, I'm calling all pastors to return to the original King James. And he's quoting all these verses. And I'm like, King James wasn't even written until 1611. Like, how was 1 Timothy 4 talking about this?
Yep. It's just hard to wrap our head around that, isn't it?
It's crafting that bubble culture that we can then manage and control.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I think that methodology was the doorway to our new political reality where we're comfortable with authoritarianism because we are used to it in our church spaces.
That's right. Oh, gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
So
how many of us in our churches have been led by a confident, abusive narcissist, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just in the water. Oh, that guy seems certain and kind of mean. You know? And yeah, so no wonder. And I also think what you were talking about, kind of the separation of Jesus' teachings. Richard Rohr, I don't know if it was a quip or something he wrote extensively about, but I have not gotten over it. The first time I heard it, a number of years ago, he said, I think we should do less worshiping Jesus and more following him. And, you know, he's trying to be provocative. I'm not sure anyone says we should do less worshiping of Jesus, but like, that's a lot of what I see too in our, 81% of our people, supporting something that's so antithetical to the kingdom, because our Christianity is about the belonging. It's about the team we're on, not about the path we're walking.
Yeah, that's a very good illustration of it.
And, I'll be the first to say, I mean, let's sit down and have a drink. I'll tell you the 10 ways that I fell short of Jesus' way just yesterday. I mean, I follow it very, very poorly, but I desire to. I want to. I hope I get swept up in Jesus' way a little bit better tomorrow. But I think there are whole parts of our Christian family that are not even being encouraged to put Jesus' words into practice.
Yeah.
But simply just believe more strongly in him. And it's hard to talk about that. It's hard to not sound like we think we're the right ones. And so I've been saying less and less talking about Christianity and more about, I always say, the peacemaking, neighbor-serving, enemy-loving way of Jesus. Like, that's what I want to give myself to. The brand of Christianity, I don't know. Is it even going to last? Should it? But the way of Jesus, the love your enemy, that is like world-changing stuff. The Beatitudes, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful. That's the way, man. That's the hope of the world. Even if Christians embody the opposite, that is still the way of the hope of the world.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine, Matt Tebby, kind of helped me see how we got so. You know Matt Tebby?
Yeah.
He helped me see how we got so off course by like spiritualizing everything in the Bible, so that it's like, well, blessed are the poor in spirit. That means we're sinful and you need this gospel to then come and rescue you. And then Luke just comes around and he's like, well, no, blessed are the poor.
Yeah.
And we're going to throw it on the mighty. And, this whole system, but that's really hard to maintain a control over. But if we can dispense the problem and the solution and then get people addicted to what we're selling, then all of a sudden we got the hook,
Yeah.
And we got them.
Yeah.
But that helps us maintain that control over that little bubble by spiritualizing everything.
Yeah.
I guess the casualty in that is actually living out the way of Jesus in that, enemy loving, neighbor caring kind of a way that ends up on the wayside. And so I've been trying to listen to the voices that haven't historically spiritualized it so that I can learn from it. Like people like Howard Thurman and Martin Luther King Jr. and James Cone. And now even modern thinkers like Kathy Kong and Kim, I forgot her last name already. Grace Jisoo Kim. There it is. Like, how did this like colonial project that we do that just like we baptized? It's like, but we still maintain power and control. Like, how did that become the dominant, pop cultural way that we just embrace the Christian faith? There's so many different answers to that. But how have you experienced that?
That's you're articulating it so well. I remember Jim Wallace in 2016, as we were coming up to the election, said, we're about to find out if American Christianity is more American or more Christian. And I think it wasn't even close. Now, here's if we could alienate the other half of all your listeners. I don't think that it's only our conservative MAGA Christian friends who are more American than Christian. I live in Brooklyn. I'm a part of an Episcopal church. I'm around a lot of progressive, left-leaning Christians, and we are all also struggling with being more American. And not even like flag waving. I would say more capitalist, consumerist, control. All those themes are alive and well on the left too.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, if you criticize, because there's so many different moving parts: economic, political, social, religious.
Yep.
And when I get like critical of the conservative brand, it's usually from that religious standpoint, because 81% are there, and I'm like,
yep,
yeah, 81. I can, but it's really hard to say those things, and then they just assume, well, you must be on the other end of the spectrum. And I'm like, no, actually, there's a lot of things the Democrats are really, really missing the point on. You know, there's
and I think one of the things that is also along those lines, that is made for the MAGA movement to do what it has done, is we are unable to talk about both and without falling into both sidism, right? Like, can we say that the Republicans are a disaster and the Democrats are a disaster without saying they will cause equal harm to our country?
There you go.
Right?
Yep.
So same thing. People, when I say, I think maybe this thing that Trump just did is going to be really damaging and dangerous. And they'll say, well, Biden. Well, maybe. And I can critique Biden all day long. I mean, I was just with all these Palestinians who every one of them can name multiple family members and friends who were killed by the weapons that Biden gave Netanyahu. So let's critique the left. I mean, there's much to critique, but you just can't then pretend, so it's all the same. It's not the same.
It's not the same.
So that's, I think the word probably, if we're back to Christian language, I think the word is discernment. When did we stop being people who could discern? It's neither good guys versus bad guys, nor everything's the same. Like there's a third and fourth and probably 100th more true path than either of those two extremes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's like, and the old way of doing Christianity is not going to work for whatever is coming. Like, no, because that is just falling in step in line behind MAGAism and is being absorbed by it and mutated by it.
Can I ask real quick, when you say the old way, what do you mean by that?
Oh gosh, the old way of this whole evangelical structure that we grew up under, that was all about you have to believe and behave in these manners or you're out.
Yeah.
That authoritarian, controlling, manipulative, domination-centered, colonizing version of the faith does not fit into the new world that is coming, whatever that might look like.
Yeah.
That is what has fallen in line behind the MAGA movement. And I believe, if you look at Jesus's critiques of the temple throughout the whole Gospels, it was all, here is, if you keep embracing your violence, your domination, and your oppression, it will exhaust the people. They will then rebel against Rome, and they will come down and destroy you. So if you look at that, and then you look at Paul's like apocalyptic writing was the fall of the Roman Empire, there's always like this on the horizon kind of a thing. And I think if Jesus were to show up today, he would have some apocalyptic language for that style of church and saying, if you keep going down these roads, not like a God's going to get you kind of a judgment, but like the natural end to that is death, violence. And we've already seen, a preview of it in 2020 at the Capitol. And it's like that is where this is headed, is things like that. So that can't exist in whatever God is going to do again, whatever resurrects, whatever new wineskins are there. That's not going to, vibe anymore. I don't know how the one ends and the one begins, and it's probably a big, Venn diagram overlap. We're taking a quick break here mid-show to let you know of an opportunity that Choir is offering. Are you deconstructing your faith? It's tough, believe me, I know, I've done it. But what if you didn't have to do it alone? Imagine having guides like Jim Palmer, Kristen Dumais, Jennifer Knapp, Brad Jerzak, Brian Zahn, Paul Young, and more by your side to help. I know I would have loved that on my journey. Well, now you can. Head on over to choiracademy.com, link will be in the show notes, and register for their Square 2 class using the promo code LIMINAL, and you will get 10% off. This course and community are designed to help you navigate your journey with wisdom and support, all because you're a fan of the Liminal Living podcast. Ministry leaders, how do you heal from the burnout, loneliness, and the relentless weight of leadership? Kaneo Center exists for you. For 5 years, Kaneo has walked with over 500 ministry leaders through their darkest seasons, offering a rare blend of compassionate coaching, therapeutically informed practices, and Jesus-centered renewal. Kaneo is launching new 24-week cohorts now, where you'll join a small group of leaders for weekly video coaching, guided curriculum, and reflections to rebuild your resilience. The cohort all ends with a retreat in Puerto Rico. As a Kaneo coach myself, I've seen how this space transforms lives. And for Liminal Living listeners, mention Liminal in your application at thecaneocenter.com/cohort to claim $100 off your cohort experience. You've poured into others, let Kaneo pour into you. If you're in a dark night or deconstruction, you know how vital it is to ground yourself in intentional practice. That's why I'm thrilled to partner with the Monk Manual, a journaling system inspired by monastic wisdom and backed by science. The Monk Manual is a daily journal companion for reflection, purpose, and aligning your actions with your deepest values. Whether you're rebuilding after deconstruction or seeking clarity in transition, this tool turns liminality into grounded growth. And now, Liminal Living listeners can save 10% on their Monk Manual using the code LIMINAL over at monkmanual.com/liminal. And remember, the wisdom of liminal spaces lies in how we journey through them. So do it with intention. And now back to our show. If you look at that evolution, old wineskins and new wineskins kind of a thing, what kind of containers do you see are really going to be able to house the new thing that God is doing as we move forward?
Yeah. Oh man, I had a totally other thing I wanted to say. Well, let me just make a comment, and then I want to answer that question because I actually have a couple real concrete thoughts.
Well, good.
The reflection on what you were saying, and this might be a little silly to say it in these ways, but in some ways, what Elon Musk is saying he's doing is maybe a little bit of what you and I believe might need to happen with the church. And so maybe the watching Musk create so much damage is a little bit instructive as we wonder how to participate in the crumbling of the American Christian church institution. So never had that thought until you were just saying that last sentence. Mm-hmm. But there's a similar impulse. This thing has lost the plot. Let's burn it down. Well, there's a lot of people involved. And if you're unloving and unwise, you can magnify the damage rather than save people from it.
Yes.
And yet, maybe this is the critique of the Democrats who just seem to want to plug their ears and just try to keep the thing alive 4 more years, a weekend at Bernie's type government, which I think there's a lot of people who want to do a weekend at Bernie's type church, right? Just keep it alive. I know it's kind of dead, but so anyways, we could probably spend a lot of time thinking about that. What we can learn from Elon Musk about the end of the church. So anyways, never thought I'd say that sentence, but
and that is not like that. I don't like, it's not a God is then exercising judgment over this thing. It's just then, like, as Jesse Wells would say, like, the ingredients you use bakes the cake you get. You know, it's like,
right.
It's not, you all messed up and now God is angry and is coming down in judgment. His name is Elon. It's more like, these are the ingredients that we have been baking with. And so here they are, the cake is delivered.
Yeah. We are punished by our sins more than we're punished for our sins.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
So to answer your question, when I think about the future, it is always ecumenical. Mm-hmm. It is always across silos rather than finding the one true silo. So that's one thing I'm certain about. Now, I don't know what that looks like. I'm a part of a lot of things at intersections. I'm a former evangelical worship leader at an Episcopal church. And so we're trying to explore this beautiful historic liturgy from the Book of Common Prayer. And we're trying to say, how can we help it flow? Mm-hmm. How do we help, you talked about translating these moments. How do we help, I like to say that one of the main roles of a worship leader is to provoke the people out of autopilot.
Oh, that is so good.
So we're going along, you can see in the moments in the liturgy where people's eyes glaze over, and they're not here anymore. They're making, the list for, later. They're doing lunch reservations. How do we help people? So intersections. Have you heard about the pastors, priests, and guides retreats that we've been holding?
I've been looking into those a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Please join us sometime. I think you'd really fit in well with this kind of conversation. But the heart of these retreats is we're trying to say we need anyone who is serving the church in any way of any tradition. We need you here to help dream together, to help worship together. We always have, liturgies that are pulling from all sorts of different traditions, practices from different traditions. We gather at different spaces. We gathered at a Quaker retreat center. Our next one in June is at a Jesuit retreat center in Chicago. And so all that to say, there is something so powerful about getting out of our silos and thinking, man, the charismatics do that. I would have thought that's weird, but I'm sitting here and that really helped me. The Catholics, when we go to this Catholic retreat center, the man who's hosting us, Father Michael Sparrow, who's been my spiritual director for over a decade, he starts in the chapel and he just says, listen, for you Protestants, can I tell you a little about the symbolism of this space? And he spends the first 15 minutes. Look, you'll see the cross. Jesus is on the cross. In the Catholic imagination, this is because, and you just watch, the lights turn on. Even for those who say, I still like it the way we do it, but now I get why you do it that way. And it just expanded my view. And so that's the very long, maybe belabored way to say, I think the future has to be ecumenical, diverse, inclusive, pulling together, making more space for more parts of the body of Christ as opposed to less.
Yeah. I think that when I talked to David Gushy back last year in October, he said that we have a really hard time being a pluralistic society. We don't know how to do it really well. Yeah. We're afraid of it and we're scared of it. And I think that applies in church context as well.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Our church, we partner with the Catholic Church and the Methodist Church in town, we hold Good Friday services together and a Thanksgiving service together. And then we do a food bank together, and then a benevolent fund for people who have emergency financial needs together.
Yeah.
And it's fun. And at one of the Good Friday services, the Methodists were doing their liturgy of the communion, and they brought all the communion stuff, and I was carrying it, and I almost tripped. And I kind of jokingly just said, "Oh, almost dropped Jesus." And with a straight face, the Methodist pastor, she said, "I was not Jesus until I prayed the prayer."
Yeah. Yeah.
In my brain, I was just like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, that's different. I don't know what that means.
Yep.
It was just totally different for me. And I was just like,
right.
Wow, I learned something today.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, like, again, being in the Episcopal world, they take that very, very serious. And I think it's both, sometimes they'd even say they're way too stuffy about it. And when I think how flippant my evangelical past was, I'm grateful for a little more, hey, this matters. There's a mystery here. I don't understand it. But it's not just, hey, let me quick drink some grape juice and get on with it. Like, something's happening here. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a gift.
Yeah. I think there's a re-enchantment that needs to happen, because if you look at the evangelical tradition, it was really rooted in like Martin Luther's Reformation, which was the de-enchantment of a lot of things, and then the enshrinement of ideas and doctrines. And,
that's well said. Yeah.
And that's something that I've learned talking with people on this show.
Yeah.
But it's like this de-enchantment of our world. And then growing up, there wasn't a lot of magic. It was just more of like emotion and inspiration. Those were the two things.
Oh, that's interesting.
There wasn't a lot of magic in this is just symbolic. We just do this because, it's not really Jesus spiritually or physically or whatever.
Yep.
And I think there's a re-enchantment that's happening again, where things are just a little bit more, at least we're at least asking, like, I wonder if there's more to this thing than just, this is what we do, and there's really, just because we have always done it this way, and this is what it kind of means. But then you look at, the Catholics, and they explain the altar and the symbolism behind it. They're explaining it with this like enchanted, otherworldly kind of a thing. Like, no, this means this, and we don't do this, and we have to do this. And, my fundamentalist previous person would be like, oh, it's a bunch of garbage, whatever. Yeah. I could walk up there and not get struck by lightning. It'd be fine. Yep. But there's like, no, there's a hallowedness. Yeah. And there's a re-enchantment happening.
Yep.
What kind of re-enchantment is energizing you with these intersections of, the old way and the new way, the evangelical, hospitable spaces, accessibility with the liturgical spaces?
My wife and I were having a conversation last week, and just talking about, like, we just got into one of those, I think we got the boys out the door in the morning for school, and then we were having coffee, and we just stumbled into a really serious conversation just about the world and about God, and how does it work, and can we trust that God's going to save the day, and just like one of those kind of moving conversations. And at one point I said, when I try to wrap my head around all this, it gets really cold. Mm-hmm. But when I put it into practice, it comes alive. And there is something that, when you accidentally say something that you're like, wait a second, that's exactly how it's worked in my life.
Anything smart I've ever said was that.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, what did I just say?
That's right. And so I think, in terms of re-enchanting, I tend to be a pretty cerebral person. Like, I'm always trying to look for a framework, and I love being in a book that's stretching me. And so that's some of how I engage the world. That's probably 4 with a 5 wing in Enneagram world. But ideas almost never change my life all the way. It's always practices. It's always embodying it in some way that stretches me. And I think it's because I can use ideas to protect myself from the mystery. to explain it away, right?
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And there's something about the embodied practices that expose me to the mystery, that dip me in the waters of the mystery. And it's uncomfortable, but that's where this, when I look back at my life, that's when things change.
Well, you just helped me take an idea I've had another step.
Okay.
Because I've talked about how good old proper theology, with air quotes, is like an insulation for reality. In reality, I mean, mystery. But then we enter into a moment of deconstruction or an intense moment of suffering, and our ideas just they're not good enough in that moment. The insulation falls off and we're exposed to the elements.
Wow.
And I'm wondering, I guess I'm just wondering, also our ideas can insulate us from whoever we label as those people, because they have the wrong ideas and we have the correct ideas.
Yeah, right.
And then you get into the practice of it, and then all of a sudden it's now I'm really exposed to the elements. I'm exposed to other people's ideas and practices as well.
Yep.
Exposed to new thoughts, new ideas that were scary before, but now all of a sudden they really get our feet on the ground with these practices. Are there some practices that you have clung to? You're these are the ones that really help me?
Yeah, for sure. Let me mention 3. The first one is one I practice rarely and terribly, but it's like a nuclear bomb of openness. It's centering prayer. Mm-hmm. It's when I can get, again, that same thing. I tend to over-attach to ideas. So centering prayer is intentionally emptying those ideas and just being. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is hard. Not doing, not proving to myself and the world that I'm valuable, but just being in the presence. So that's one I fight a lot. I'll do it for a while, and then I'll fight it and avoid it and run from it, and then I'll come back to it. So the one that's probably been the most consistent is the Ignatian Examen. Mm-hmm. And that one, I have a Jesuit spiritual director, so he's always been on me about that, and it's really transformed how I see the world.
What does that look like in practice? I know you got the consolation, desolation, but how do you practice it? What do you do?
The way he taught me was 5 steps. Like a 15-minute practice in 5 steps. You invite the Spirit to guide the examen. Number 2, you look back over the last 24 hours and particularly pay attention to the goodness. You begin in gratitude. Review the day in gratitude, which again, as a melancholy Enneagram 4, was transformational. Because I usually start my prayers with, God, this world sucks. This is terrible. And this prayer forces us to begin with what's good. Mm-hmm. It just changes everything. Number 3, we notice the emotions that surface as we're looking back over the day. And the insight here is our brains, we know the right answer, but if we pay attention to our emotions, they'll often tell us the truth. Great insight. Number 4, we choose one of those emotions and spend some time praying about it. So what feels most alive, either the gratitude or the horror, or what feels most alive. And then number 5, look forward to the future and hope. What do you want to hold on to from the last 24 hours? And what do you want to let go of? It's just been transformational. And so we do that corporately. I love to lead kind of communal examens. And then it's just like the primary way I pray, noticing. So that's helpful. And then the third one, probably the most concrete, is the practice of forgiveness. I have had a couple different experiences, but I had a recent one maybe 8 months ago where I was totally overtaken by resentment, which for me, it usually doesn't go to anger. It usually goes to depression. And overwhelmed with the world. And once I was able to unpack a little bit, realized I was so angry at someone for doing this thing. And it was one of those, I won't tell you the whole story, that maybe for another time. But I attempted to forgive concretely that action, and I accidentally forgave a whole season of the universe.
Oh, wow.
And like, every word that I want to say is going to sound like a cartoon or a cliche or hyperbole. It unlocked something that had been locked for a couple of years. It's unbelievable. I remember I ended up saying afterwards, forgiveness is a miracle. And I think what's worth noting about it is I knew I needed to forgive them. I know what the Bible says. you know, I believe in forgiveness, but believing in forgiveness does nothing to set our heart free. We've got to do it. And so you could probably say that about just about any practice. Just believing it's true doesn't change anything. We've got to do it.
Yeah.
And then in the doing, we make the road by walking. In the practicing, in the engaging, suddenly we look down and I'm like, I just accidentally let go of that thing that I've been clinging to for 2 years. Wow. Thanks be to God.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm constantly surprised. It's 2020, you look back and you have 2020 vision, but I'm just constantly surprised at how uncomfortable my faith tradition has been with embodiment when its primary doctrine is the incarnation.
Isn't it? It's wild. Yes.
I'm still in awe and surprised by how uncomfortable we are with the embodiment and fleshment of things. And it's like, it just shows you how we just live in our ideas all the time.
It's so true. On our retreats, I know I mentioned the pastors, priests, and guides retreats already, but on our retreats, we always have one of the guides, the leaders of the retreat, be an embodiment person. Oh, wow. And so on this last retreat, her name was Reverend Leisha Epperson. And she grew up here in Manhattan as a dancer, a trained professional dancer. And then in the last few years, she became an Episcopal priest. Wow. And so she brings that intersection of body and spirit together. And so all through the retreat, we would, wrestle with some idea, have these conversations, and then Leisha would say, please stand up. Let's begin with our breath. And, help us work these ideas from the 2 inches of our brain into our hands, into our lungs, into our guts. I mean, really, really powerful stuff. Very uncomfortable for almost all of us. Mm-hmm. But by the end, we were like, Leisha, would you come to our church every Sunday? Would you help us get out of our brains? My spiritual director always says, you're not just a brain on a stick. You are a fully embodied image of your creator.
Oh, that's so good.
Really helpful. Yeah.
Brain on a stick. That's like, that is perfect.
That's how most of us were raised, to be a brain on a stick. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Well, I don't want to let you go before we get a chance to talk about your book, because you have released this book, Eternal Current, and I'm wondering, why did you write that book, and what are you hoping it accomplishes in the world?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I say what it's about, listeners will say, "Oh man, that's what he's been talking about the whole time." The central idea, it's called the Eternal Current: How a Practice-Based Faith Can Save Us from Drowning. And the whole idea is there is this great river flowing throughout human history towards the redemption and restoration of all things. And Jesus called this the kingdom of God. And Jesus didn't just say, believe correctly about the river. Jesus said, join me in it. Let me teach you how to swim. And so the whole book is kind of my story. That I shared the story at the beginning about my faith falling apart because I thought it was just believing correctly about stuff, and then realizing, no, the invitation is to swim. And so the whole book is like, well, how do we do it then? How do we move from a beliefs-based faith to a practice-based faith? And it was. I really enjoyed writing it. My wife is an author, so I've seen her write, for years, and she makes it look so easy. It was not so easy for me, but it was so joyful to get to try to capture this this story onto a page. So probably 8 years ago, but I still really believe in it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to now bring full circle your song, your soundtrack. Has something come to mind and captured your attention? This is like asking like a chef, what's your favorite season to use in your in your dishes? But is there a song, an artist, a band that is just popping into your brain that is the soundtrack?
I think the one that keeps coming back is Sigur Rós.
The Icelandic group.
The Icelandic group. Yep.
Why is that?
And there's a couple reasons. One is, I think they embody the sad people making beautiful music, they're like the center of my, they're also, the music is always beautiful and always has at least one layer of ugly. The chord progression will be really, really pleasing, but then he'll be playing the guitar with a bow with this really nasty fuzz, pedal that just dirties it up. And there's something that really resonates with me about that. And then I think probably the other thing is because he sings in, I think he calls it Hopelandic. It's not Icelandic language. He makes up his own language.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. So I don't ever know what he's saying, but there's something that creates so much more space because then I know what he's saying. He's saying that thing that I've been holding all day, and he's saying it in a way I never could. So there's some power. It's not in spite of it being in a different language. I think it's precisely because it's in a different language.
Yeah.
So
you're transcending the ideas.
Yeah.
The logos word stuff. And it's just, no, let me just say how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Put, vocalities to the emotions.
Yeah. My one of my colleagues on our last retreat, she led this imaginative prayer exercise, which was new to many of us in the room. But the key that she said is participate in this imaginative prayer, but don't try to make meaning out of it while we're doing it.
Oh.
Isn't that powerful?
Yes.
Because I'm, and maybe you would be too, like constantly, like you have a thought and you're like, ooh, that fits into the, you're building a container while you're doing it.
Yes.
She said, don't do that. You can reflect on it later and please, find some meaning, but just participate, just join us. And that freed up all this space to just kind of embody the prayer.
That is so powerful.
Yeah.
Because I've had like a meditation practice, like a Vaspin Zen meditation practice I've been doing for years now. And like you get these weird sensations in your brain because your brain goes through these different states, and it's just, I was taught to be afraid of them as a kid, but really it's just brain states. It's brain doing things. It's biological.
Yep.
And, they give you coaches and I'm calling them up and I'm like, I think I'm super spiritual because I just had this experience and it was, I was like this and this and I was feeling this. And he's like, no, no, not actually. No.
Yeah.
It's like that happened. Yeah. Yeah. But don't try and, it doesn't always happen to everybody, but that doesn't mean you've reached something that other people haven't.
Sure.
That's just what your body did. I was like, oh, so I kind of felt a little bit bummed. I was like, I thought I was cool for a minute there.
Right.
But then as you progress through meditation, you just start noticing. It's like, oh yeah, that thing that happens in my brain sometimes is happening. And it's meditation. Yeah. And you just like, it is what it is and no meaning to it at all. You reflect on it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, I've really loved this conversation. It's been a lot of fun.
Me too.
And I barely touched any of my questions because it was just so natural conversation. Cool. But I do want to ask, where do you want to send people to purchase your book and like connect with what you're doing in the world?
Yeah. I mean, can find me on Instagram and my website is just my name, Aaron Niequist. The book is The Eternal Current. And so if you are wanting to learn how to swim in those ways, please check that out. I would say also, I know I brought it up a couple times. It's so on my mind what we're doing right now, these pastors, priests, and guides retreats. And they are for like official pastors, priests, and guides, but also we say anyone who is serving a local church in any way. So we have spiritual directors, we have vestry team members, we have worship leaders, liturgists, and we'd invite you to join us. We're doing a 1-day in Boston in April. We're doing a full 3-day retreat in Chicago in June, which, Tom, I think that's the one you should join us in. And then in November, we're going to be in Malibu, suffering for the Lord up in the hills of Malibu. But yeah, it's a retreat, not a conference. So we say it's about rest and healing. It's about connecting with others on the journey. And then it's about reimagination. Like, what does the church need to look like for this new world that's emerging? So that would be another way. And that's just pastorspriests.and guides.com if you want to join us.
Well, I will make sure that those links are in the show notes so people can click on them and just not have to search for them.
Yeah. Thanks.
Right. Well, Aaron, thanks again for coming on the show.
So good to be with you.
It's been so good. It was so good.
All right.